body, it is slightly heavier than you'd expect for a plastic build, and whilst this doesn't help with flight times, it actually does make the drone feel less like a toy and more like a pro device. Underneath the motors are coloured LEDs which serve as indicator lights for GPS, flight modes and connection status, whilst also making the drone look pretty cool.
DJI Spark has been released in May 2017 and it immediately became a top-selling drone, mainly due to its small form factor and great portability, all that coming at a relatively low price. I've been using this drone ever since it got released, and although I've now upgraded to the new DJI Mavic Air, I still want to talk about the overall capabilities of the Spark.
Battery serves not only as...
While we're talking about the Mavic, just real quick, a lot of you are probably wondering, like, what is the difference? Why do you pay so much more for the Mavic? And there's a couple, there's many reasons. A couple of the main ones though is, first off, battery life. Your flight time is almost double on the Mavic. You can get 25 to 30 minutes on the Mavic, whereas this is only about 15 to 16, right. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're actually flying a craft in the air, you're flying something through the air like a bird, that's a long time. That's a pretty long flight. In fact, like the mini race quads that we mentioned earlier, those only fly for about 3 minutes at a time.
The power button, but also as a pairing or mode button, which can enable the hand tracking mode or pair a new controller to the drone. And if you're planning on getting a Spark, then I would definitely recommend picking up a couple of these batteries, because their capacity is only 1,480 mAh, and my maximum flight time that I've achieved is 13 minutes. And that 13 minutes does go by pretty quickly, so I would definitely recommend picking up a couple so that you can stay in the air for longer.
Okay, despite all my bitching about that Wi-Fi nonsense, that was pretty incredible. I took it way further than I had expected. The image quality on this thing was amazing, and alright, so in conclusion, biggest concerns with this were around its like flyability. How easy is it to control in the air? Because on the phone, it kind of sucks.
Products. So when, like what you were saying, when this first came out, we were kind of confused, like what is this for? Because we really like the Mavic. It does have the small form factor, a little bit better performance. But what I came to conclude after using this for a little bit and seeing other people use it, I'd say this is for people who are not necessarily power users for drones. Somebody who just wants a drone to have as a fun recreational tool.
The drone is where the main components live. The sensor bar houses the obstacle sensors, which essentially make this drone impossible to crash forwards into things. Provided you're in GPS mode, the drone will stop itself even if you keep pushing it forwards on the sticks. The bar also houses these sensors for gesture control, which I think is more of a gimmick than anything. Underneath the sensor bar is the 2-axis gimbal, and this is probably the most lacking part of the drone. The roll and tilt stabilization is great, and you definitely...
This drone ever since it got released, and although I've now upgraded to the new DJI Mavic Air, I still want to talk about the overall capabilities of the Spark and whether it's still worth buying in 2018. If you're not familiar with the main features of the Spark, go ahead and watch my full review video, which I'll link in the cards and in the description. In that video, I talk about the pros and cons and everything else you need to know about the Spark, but in today's video I'll focus more on what the Spark brings in 2018 and how well it stacks against the newer and more expensive drones that we can get right now.
You don't see propellers anywhere in video mode, it's just the yaw axis that has problems. The camera on Spark can shoot up to 1080p at 30 frames a second with no other video or even frame rate options. It's decent enough bitrate footage at 24 megabits per second, but it's definitely not the best thing you'll ever see. There are options for manual ISO and shutter speed settings, but I find it better to use auto mode because most drone shots have an exposure change at some point.
Documentation. This is the actual drone, battery, extra propellers here. Controller, propeller guard, charger, AC adapter for charger. That's everything.
But I do think it's important is that the Spark just looks friendly.
Yes.
And so when I say it's the best drone for most people, part of that is it's more pleasing to look at.
Yeah.
It looks friendly. Honestly, the Mavic looks sweet, but it also looks pretty aggressive.
Yeah, and for those of you that might sound crazy too, the reason why that's important is because when you go to a park or when you go to a public place and you pull out a drone, typically if there's other people there, majority of them have never seen a drone before, or a lot of them don't even know what a drone is. Some people don't even know this technology exists. So it can make people a little bit uneasy, especially if you're flying like a little race quad.
Photos from Spark are actually really great. You've got 12 megapixel wide angle photos that are rich in detail and color accuracy, and have a level of sharpness that doesn't look artificial. You have up to 3 frames a second photo shooting, which I haven't found a use for yet, but it is definitely nice to have. I think with just a little editing, the photos that you can get from the Spark can match the photos of the Mavic Pro or even the Mavic Air, with the only problem here being the lack of raw image shooting, which can restrict your editing ability. But I can look past that for the price that you pay.
Equally as small, and to a certain extent that's true. The Mavic does fold up and it is very small, but the Mavic is a more girthy quad. It weighs a lot more. This thing with the battery in is super lightweight, so you can easily toss this in your backpack. It also seems pretty rugged. There's not as many moving parts on this as there is the Mavic.
Actually, it doesn't fold up at all, so
Yes.
that's something else to note.
Yep.
And something to consider, while it is incredibly small, and I know everybody says that, but it really is unbelievably small.
Yes. Smaller in
especially-
person than when you see it on screen.
It is, and I mean, a business card just about covers it.
Yeah.
which is crazy.
This clip has no color correction or any other editing on it, it's straight from the camera. This is what I mean by not having to worry about settings and other variables before you start shooting. With the Spark, it simply works. Again, this is something some people will not be happy with, but that's why there are plenty of other more professional drones out there that you can buy that give you lots more settings to play with.
So let's get into specs a little bit.
Sure. So, well, first off, this has all of your standard DJI, whatever you want to call it, smart drone features as far as like GPS. So it's going to pick up satellites. It's going to hold its position based on GPS. It has things like altitude hold. So it's actually using a barometer in there to hold its altitude. So when you let go of the sticks, this thing is going to lock and it's going to stay right there until you tell it to do something, or it runs out of battery, in which case it'll come back and land right where it took off.
The regular package of the Spark, which doesn't have a controller, currently retails for $399, but if you opt for the Fly More combo, which comes with the remote controller, an additional battery and some accessories, you're looking at $549. For comparison, the newest drone by DJI, the Mavic Air, retails for $799 and $999 for its Fly More combo.
Every time you take it off, it recognizes that as its home point, so it always knows where to go to come back home.
And I guess a brief summarized version of that is that it flies exactly like you would think a DJI product would.
Yeah.
I know that there were some concerns with people with the video signal and operating off of Wi-Fi. We will get to that. But it flies exactly like you think a DJI product should.
It just works like you would expect it to. It flies very, very nice. Now, a lot of you, if you're looking for your first drone and you're looking at DJI, maybe some other things, a lot of people often are either drawn to a DJI quad or a race quad.
Using the